So again,
Amy, this is Dawn.
Hey Dawn, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Amy. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Welcome to today's
I just
session.
wanted to say, okay, thank you. I wanted to introduce you very briefly and to let the group know that I will be sending out the slides and the recording that you just mentioned. I know that's very often a question in regards to, are they going to be receiving them? And they will. So I will send them out. If there's something that,
oh,
wow,
if
people
we could
here
just make
during
sure
the
we're unmuted.
Yeah. If there's anything else that people hear during the presentation that they would like to hear more about and want to let me know about that, we can, you and I can talk too about sending out other information as well.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Amy, for doing the presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me today. So, Dawn, if you could, as I begin my presentation, it's hard for me to view the chat box as I am presenting. So if you would mind, could you monitor the chat box for questions as we go through today's content?
I would be happy to.
So much, I appreciate it. So welcome, everyone. Again, today's topic is job coaching and supervision for job coaching. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm so happy that Washington and the supervisors of employment services within Washington are also interested in, because it can be challenging. It can be challenging at times when we are supporting people with mental health conditions in obtaining work, but also maintaining work. That job tenure piece is so critical, and it's something within IPS that we talk about quite frequently, that the job tenure can be lacking at times. So it's always important as supervisors to consider, how are we bolstering providers' skills with job maintenance through that job coaching piece. So today's session is not a in-depth training. That would be I think a full day session, right, on job coaching. Today is going to provide you with some information as a supervisor as to what would you want to be cognizant of and mindful of in supporting your staff in building their expertise in job coaching. So what's on today's menu? We are looking at strategies for providing supervision for job coaching, with a review of the interventions and services offered throughout job coaching. We're going to focus on a specific skills assessment that I have utilized in the past for job coaching as well as academic coaching. But this particular form is slated for the employment environment. And how do we help, as supervisors, our staff being skilled in supporting individuals with mental health conditions and their employment goals? And it comes down to a lot of skills development as well as resource linkage. We want our providers, the people we're supervising, our staff, to be competent in skill development and resource linkage. That's a huge component of job coaching. And I'm also going to provide and review very quickly a supervisor checklist for skills teaching today. So that's on the menu. If you would like to direct yourself to the chat and add anything that you would like to learn more about job coaching and supervising job coaching, please feel free. I want to make sure that this session is hitting your needs as supervisors, that it is pertinent to the delivery of service provision within your organization, and that you take from today the skills, information, resources to be able to supervise job coaches more efficiently. So while you are in your chat box, adding any additional agenda topics or questions, please consider, as you think about your current census in the program you supervise, how many consumers in the program are currently employed and working on job maintenance? How many people are working, and how many people are receiving those job coaching services from the staff you supervise. You can go ahead and enter that in the chat as well. And it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. You can give a rough estimate of what that looks like right now in the program that you supervise. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Doug. Hello, Shauna. Hello, Sharon. Welcome. Teresa, thank you. About 10 individuals in Teresa's program are currently maintaining employment goals. Shannon, 2 from her program. 35, Rebecca, thank you. 35 to 65 out of hundreds of clients from Catherine. 30% from Dina. 21 from Sheila Parker. Thank you. 5, 50, 35 to 40 from Erin, 5 from Sarah, 15 from Doug, 12 from Paul. So we have a wide mix already that we're looking at in terms of respondents. We have 31 from Vianney, 3 of 11 on someone's specific caseload. Okay, so we have a wide variety of people who are in the process of maintaining employment goals. When we look at, you know, the census as a whole and what percentage of people are currently working, it is varied. It varies depending on your program. If you're primarily an employment program, it may be higher than let's say a housing program that is infusing or integrating some of these vocational services into additional mixed modalities of mental health services. Regardless of what your numbers look like, the skills are the same across the board for practitioners or providers. You have to have a certain skill set as a provider in helping people to maintain employment goals. And it's important as a supervisor that you're very mindful of how you're building these skill sets. Because I think historically what we see in the supported employment model, IPS, or choose, get, keep, leave, is we see that practitioners can be very good at getting people jobs. They can really excel at the very concrete steps of seeking for employment, doing that job search, preparing people for the interview, getting people the job offer. But then when people get the job, it may be very difficult for practitioners to switch hats because they're no longer the job developer, they are the job coach. Ooh. And job coaching is quite different from job developing. We say in employment services that job coaching starts from the moment a person gets that acceptance of a job, that offer, and they accept. That's when we switch our hats. And job coaching can be very much a needed piece of service when individuals begin a new job. Beginning a new job has a whole host of concerns and barriers and issues to navigate. And so this is when job coaching may be most needed and maybe needed in a higher frequency, right? When we think about employment services, we think about that. Oh, bless you. We think about them being on a spectrum, being able to type services or increase services as needed. And a new job may be a time when services, especially frequency of services, go up. But that does not mean that if someone has been maintaining employment for months at a time, that they no longer receive service. This in fact speaks to the IPS principle of follow along supports. right? In IPS, which is the best practice model of employment services. Can you make sure that you are muted? I'm getting a little feedback. Thank you, guys. So when we are looking at someone maintaining their employment goals, and they have been employed for several months, half a year, sometimes the thought process may be discharge or discontinue services. And this is a pitfall when we consider job coaching. What we know about mental health conditions is that they're cyclical in nature. There are periods where symptoms wax and wane, right? And so if we are seeing that a person is thriving in their employment placement, we would be remiss if we say, okay, I'm deciding to terminate services for your job coaching supports. Because that person may need those supports in the future. They may experience symptoms that could impact them and their job performance or their job satisfaction later on. So we want to make sure that while we're being mindful of doing job coaching and really stress this with the people that you're supervising, yes, be prepared for that hire, but also be mindful of how are you making your services flexible for people who are doing long-term job maintenance. How are you checking in? How are you accommodating service usage to increase or decrease based on their need? And that brings us to our next point. The degree and amount of service always depends on the individual. So you want to really stress to the people you're supervising, your staff, how do you assess for need? How do you assess what the person wants? How do you support the individual, right, as staff? How are you supporting the individual in determining their frequency of service for their job satisfaction, for their job success, as well as for their wellness needs? When we think about job coaching, we also want to be mindful of the goal of job coaching. Job coaching speaks to two. Oh, do we have a question? Just make sure that you are muted if you are joining with us today.
Amy, there is from Dan to everyone, strategies for continued job coaching for job seekers and continuing the conversation is a question that he has.
Oh, can you repeat the question?
Strategies for continued job coaching for job seekers and continuing the conversation. And he added, yes. My job seekers communication lags.
Yes. So strategies when the person is receiving job coaching, how do you keep them engaged? Dan, this is an amazing question and it speaks to today's presentation. If you have a staff person that is unaware of how services shift when the person receives their job offer and they go to work, and the staff person is unable to articulate how services change, what services are offered now that they're employed. If they cannot develop an intentional goal plan that identifies specific needs to that individual, engagement will drop off. You have to do a very good job as a supervisor in prepping your practitioners and staff to assess for job coaching need. When the services that are developed based from assessments and make it to the goal plan and make it to the progress notes, right? We talk about that golden thread all the time. When your staff are doing that, it automatically increases engagement because a person is receiving something that they find of value, speaks to their needs, and is supporting their long-term goals. And we'll get into that. But I so appreciate your point and where you're coming from because we see it all the time. So going back to the goal of job coaching, we want job coaching to do a couple of things. One, we want the person to be successful at work or optimize their work performance, right? When someone is doing well at work, they're going to most likely stay employed longer. But success and satisfaction are two different things. Let me give you an example. I feel satisfied when I'm singing around my house, but I'm not successful at it. Does that make sense? I can like to sing, but I don't do a good job at it. So job coaching, to my point, needs to help people to be successful, but it also needs to help people be satisfied. When you have someone who is doing well at what they do, they're getting good performance feedback, and they're happy about what they do, that bolsters job tenure. So job coaching should look at satisfaction, how the person feels about work, as well as success, how others perceive their performance. And additionally, to add to this three-pronged goal of job coaching for your staff should foster independence. As a job coach, we don't want to do for the person. We want to help the person build skills so that they can do for themselves. Additionally, and I think we made this point, but I want to reiterate this, successful job coaching begins even before the first day on the job. There are things that job coaches should be doing, preparatory work, to help that person be successful. So as a supervisor, how do you want to train your staff to be good job coaches? First one, preparing for the start of the job. All your staff should be well-versed in these things listed. Again, this is all in preparation of even before they start the first day. Job coaches that you supervise should support the consumer in obtaining the following: the job description and the work schedule. This is critical because later on in a few slides, we're going to be talking about how the staff that you supervise should be doing analyses, worksite analysis, job analysis, task analysis, and they're going to obtain a lot of that information from the job description. So the job description gives a blueprint for the job coach of what that consumer, who is now a worker, right, that amazing role and identity of worker, what they're going to be responsible for. And they can tailor their job coaching services to the needs of that particular place of employment so that worker can be successful and satisfied. Additionally, new employee handbook for policies and procedures. This is so critical. Sometimes when we're working with individuals in employment services, the people coming in may have not extensive work histories. They may not know the etiquette, the work environment, have soft skills. They may not be familiar with common workplace policies and procedures. And so having the handbook, right, having your staff acquire the handbook, and let me clarify that. This is conversations that your staff should be having with the consumer to support the consumer in requesting the handbook. And I'm making that distinction because there are some services within job coaching where we have consent to contact the employer for certain things. And at times the person does not consent, and that is perfectly fine. And that is often what happens. And that's normative, right? When a person going to work can advocate on their own behalf, can have conversations with the supervisor on their own behalf. We want to build those skills for the people that are coming to your programs. So you have to really supervise and train your staff to have these discussions so that the person that they're working with can advocate for themselves. So that acquisition of that handbook, where the job coach and the consumer can review these policies and procedures during sessions to get the pertinent information. Additionally, the job coach should be supervised and trained on the ways in which to support the training protocol. So obtaining information, and again, that goes to the consumer, obtaining information about the training protocol so that this conversation can be fleshed out during meetings in terms of role plays, discussion, and opportunities for feedback. Additionally, job coaches should be trained to have the consumer get all of the pertinent contact information for the supervisor or any other point person within their employer. This is going to be critical for things like call out procedures, informing them that they're running late, right? All of those that we or the job coach will be providing to the consumer. And additionally, they want you, in terms of the supervisor, you want to train your staff in getting a list of items the employee should bring on the first day. So documentation, identification, name tag, uniform, all of those things can be contingent upon starting and can impact the success of the first day if they're not with the individual. So this is why we say job coaching really begins even before they start with this preparatory work. So take a second and consider, are these things common protocol for the staff that you supervise? Are they having these discussions? Are they trained to have these discussions? Do you observe these things laid out in progress notes when you're doing your review of charts? Do you observe these things in goal plans? Remember that common thread, that golden thread. Another part of this preparatory work, and this is so very critical and crucial, is the concept of job disclosure. Disclosure is the act of sharing with the employer the presence of a health condition. So I want to ask you, and please utilize the chat box, how do you train your staff to speak with consumers, workers, about disclosure in the work setting? What does that training process look like right now? What does supervision look like right now? I'm currently conducting research on disclosure within the academic and work settings. And we see that people without a disclosure plan will unintentionally disclose information to classmates, coworkers, during times where they feel pressured, times where they feel like they have to explain behavior or experiences or communication issues or exchanges. And the worker or the student ends up feeling regretful and guilty and shamed when they don't have a disclosure plan in place, and they end up disclosing without having the intention to disclose. And so before that employee, the consumer that is now working, gets to the job site, oh, we have some feedback. Remember, please, to keep muted. Thank you so very much. So you as a supervisor want to be mindful of how are you training on this disclosure component? What do you tell staff is their role in exploring disclosure? Dawn, do we have any comments yet?
Well, I was actually just typing one in, which I can read to you if you'd like. I said when I supervise, I would teach staff to focus on the behavior and the resolution of that behavior. So an example being maybe a person who was schizophrenic and had disorganized thinking would benefit from a checklist, and that we'd found successful. So focusing a little less on what the actual health issue was and more on how it impacted their ability to work and how we had helped them to resolve it.
Perfect, perfect. So looking at the implication of what they were experiencing and not so much the health condition. I love that. From Let's see, Teresa, we have a disclosure worksheet that helps to guide the conversation. Excellent. Any handouts that you can offer your staff to guide the conversation, Teresa, is going to keep things organized and concise. Excellent. Catherine, we have a disclosure form as well that the staff and client sign. It's subject to change. Awesome. Great. Yes, let the person utilize the tool to see their preferences. Some people are visual, right, Catherine? Amazing. Sarah, there's a, oh, I will see if I can address that, Sarah, with the feedback. Dan asks if anyone is willing to share their disclosure worksheet or handout, please email it to him, and his email is in the chat box. So please, if you have a form, Dan would like that passed along. Dan, I have forms as well. When you're considering your disclosure training for staff, you want your vocational specialists to be mindful of the following. Their role is not to tell the person what to do. Their role is to inform and educate. And so how do they inform and educate? They should tell the person about their legal rights within the Americans with Disability Act. And note that yes, you can get accommodations if you're having concerns or difficulties related to your health condition, but your health information is private and personal and does not have to be shared with anyone on the work site. If you do decide to disclose to access your ADA rights, you want to make sure your training includes who they tell. It only goes to HR. They don't have to disclose their health condition to their supervisor or their coworkers or colleagues. So you want to make sure that whatever worksheet you have has a brief component about the ADA rights. We always want to make sure that people are well informed, especially of their rights. Then you can explore the consumer's preference with disclosing using MI skills, motivational interviewing skills. A decisional balance of the pros and cons of disclosing on the work site is a perfect example of using that. You also, if they choose to disclose, you want your staff to be able to develop a disclosure script with the consumer. A disclosure script allows for the consumer and your staff to sit side by side and collaborate on what they would say to HR if they're disclosing. And you can reinforce this through role playing and modeling. Having a disclosure plan in place and training for your staff really helps to eliminate miscommunication as well as unintentional disclosures from the person receiving service. The next step, right, step one that you want to train your staff on is preparation. Step two is you want to train your staff on analyses or analysis of the work site, of the job, and the tasks. And this can be done on-site or off-site, depending on the disclosure preference. Off-site is when you train your staff to have conversations with the worker, the consumer, about their work site, their job, and their tasks. And that is relying a lot on self-report of the consumer. On-site is when the job coach goes on-site and works side by side with the individual. And this requires the consumer to have disclosed that they have a health condition and to get permission for a job coach to come onto the site with them. Now, in my 10 years of providing employment services, I have only done on-site job analyses once or twice. All of the other analysis that I have done has been off-site because the person chose not to disclose. So as a supervisor, you want to make sure that your staff are well prepared to do analysis of the work site, of the job, and the job tasks off-site, because that is primarily the mode of preference that people are going to identify. So worksite analysis is learning the lay of the land. Worksite analysis helps. I'm sorry?
I was going to say we have one question.
Oh, yes, Dawn, please.
What about FML? So I'm assuming family medical leave, are they required to disclose to their supervisor?
So family medical leave has a specific application, and that gets sent to HR. And I'm not sure what FMLA looks like for the state of Washington. You know, I have utilized it previously when I was out for my pregnancy and giving birth to my son. And I recall having, a doctor having to fill paperwork out and send that to my employer, and HR had to review that. So in New Jersey, how it's set up is that, yes, the HR will see what is the specific condition that is impacting the person from being present at work. That may be how Washington State also sets it up. But I do have a resource slide at the end of today's presentation that hyperlinks social services in Washington State, so Washington State's Department of Labor. So hopefully we'll have a link for that, Deja. Thank you, good question. So worksite analysis is the overall picture. What's the work culture? What does the layout of the space look like? What are potential areas that could be difficult for the person in terms of their job and where they're working? For example, thinking about the layout of the building, are there specific areas that might be distracting for the person? Do they have a place to go for lunch break? Do they have a place to go for their smoke break? So it's, in the larger sense, the work site and the culture of that particular work environment. And knowing this is so crucial. You want a person and your staff to be well equipped to say, what is the culture like? How do you fit into this culture? Let's chat about that. A job analysis primarily comes from the job description. It lists all of the job duties and essential functions of that job. And you want to train your staff, the vocational specialists, to be able to look at the job and all the job duties required and have a conversation with the consumer. What is it that you do well? Where are your strengths in the tasks required of you? What is challenging for you? Where are the barriers? What are the things that you're getting good feedback on? What are the things that you're getting asked to do differently or to improve upon? And lastly, a task analysis is looking at one specific job task, breaking it down step by step, finding the efficient way and the most successful way for the person to do a job task, writing it out either in step-by-step form, putting pictures up to remind the person and prompt the person of what comes next. There are some forms that you can utilize for these analyses. There are a bunch of different forms out there. Not all of them really transfer to all work environments. My suggestion, and I can send some of these forms via email, but my suggestion is that when you're training staff, you train them to use their good communication techniques and open-ended questions to ask about these things personally, one-on-one with the individual or consumer. And when they're working on this analysis, it's really to get down to the nitty-gritty of what skills do they need and what resources are required to be successful. Lack of skills, lack of resources can truly be the root cause to successful employment. And if you're not doing a proper assessment, you won't know what you don't know. So the staff that you supervise have to have different methods of assessing these skills of resource linkage or availability. So consider, what assessments are your staff currently using? What assessments do you currently use to help people who have a job determine what their strengths are so you can leverage them, and where their needs are so you can build them? We always say good goal plans, intentional services are built out of need, the needs that the person has. So how do we identify those needs? You can go ahead and put that in the chat box if you'd like.
Hold on. Sorry.
And this is an example of step 3. I chose this example, developing worksite communication, because this is a common pitfall. People will leave jobs frequently because of communication errors. communication issues, miscommunication with supervisors and with colleagues, coworkers. And this is in our purview. This is in your staff's purview, a supervisor's purview, to assess and build these things, because they can be heavily influenced by the presence of a mental health condition. What you see at the bottom of the screen is a sample of the assessment that I'm going to be showing you. So just for very visual people, the point that I've been making is that we have to assess skills and needs, determine what's critical, what will make the most impact, and again, utilize a person's skill strengths to our advantage and to their advantage for job success and satisfaction. When we assess skill, we always assess resource simultaneously to see what do they have, what's critical to the job, and what's missing. Common areas that you will see when doing a skills assessment include transportation, the skill of using transportation or public transportation, the resource of transportation, communication, accommodations, decision-making, and this last one is executive functioning, those time management and organization skills. So let's take a moment to look at a specific skills assessment for employment. You're going to get this form. This was modified by a 1995 publication that looked at important skills for employment. And there are so many important skill sets that come up in this tool that typically wouldn't come up in other conversations, I feel. So it starts with the instructions for the provider and the person receiving service. I urge you to train your staff on the utilization of this or a similar tool that looks at all facets of skills. And it's on a Likert scale, always, sometimes, rarely, never, with different headings and variables or skill sections. And the person reads a statement. Here in psychosocial skills, it's difficult for me to ask for help. I stay away from people at work. I feel rejected by others. And they simply check off on the Likert scale if the statement applies to them to that degree, right? So it's self-reporting in nature. We see communication skills. I speak so softly, no one hears me. That was a big problem when I was job coaching a person who was working in customer service. We had to work on the skill of projecting his voice. I'd rather read directions than listen to them. I interrupt others. It's difficult to listen to understand others, right? Behavior is another subsection. Thinking and learning. It's hard to learn information. I'm easily distracted. I reach the wrong conclusion. I'm disorganized. I don't have enough energy to do my work. Again, I'm sure you can see the value of having a person self-report on these statements, but it doesn't end there. The assessment is the first piece. The conversation that the provider and the consumer are having thereafter is what's critical. And how this information gets relayed into services and the goal plan is even more critical. Relationships, we know that people are more successful on jobs when they feel connected to others. So seeing where are they at with relationships at work. Certain people make me feel like it's not going to work at work. I have a hard time maintaining my friendships and performing well at work. Social integration, I have friends at work. When I'm at work, I eat with other people, right? Something that we may not even consider asking. or practitioners may not consider asking, but can really make or break the experience of the job for an individual. Then we go into medications and how that may impact work, self-care, speaking to hygiene or symptoms, health, whether or not the person has any comorbidities or other health conditions that could be impacting them and work, emotions, treatment needs, and resource needs. This is a very self-explanatory tool. I've utilized this for over 10 years, and it's been very assistive. It has made for better goal plans, and Dan, to your point earlier, it can help to identify the real meat and potatoes of what someone needs. And when we address these things, they stay engaged in services. So I would urge you to take a look at this tool or something similar if this doesn't speak to you, and provide it to the people that you supervise. Bring to individual supervision, bring it to team meetings so that you can get staff's feedback and so that they can use it in the field. I couple this checklist with tool right here. Hello? This
Amy,
other
there's a couple in the chat box. Dan had said, great, would love to add this checklist to my workflow. Shannon had said, you probably already answered this, but will the form be available?
Absolutely.
And then Dan had said, how do we take action after completing the skills checklist?
Beautiful. Yes, Dan, I love that. So again, you want to have your staff use the checklist and then to have discussions using counseling, your communication and counseling skills. Tell me more about this. What does this look like? What specific area are you having difficulty with? And when you flesh out this information, you'll better understand what are the pertinent skills. Is it a communication skill? Do they need to know how to request feedback? Do they need to know how to integrate feedback? Do they need to know how to manage emotions when receiving feedback? Do they need to know how to initiate conversations with coworkers? Do they need to know how to maintain a conversation with coworkers? So there's ways to break down these things to identify what the barriers are. And you have to have really good communication skills. You have to train your practitioners, your employment specialists to utilize their open-ended questions and reflections and probes to get at what is the true barrier. When you identify those things, Dan, then they can be included on the goal plan as the services you're working on. And supervisors, you can attend in vivo supervision to determine how these skill teachings are faring with this checklist. This is a supervisor checklist to observe skills teaching for job coaching. And so it's a yes, no for the criteria with your comments section. Does the practitioner clearly state the overall goal during the session, identify the skill name that they're working on, define the skill? Do they have materials? Is the practitioner speaking clearly during skills teaching? Does the practitioner communicate a sense of enthusiasm and mastery of the skill content? Do they provide information clearly organized? Is the practitioner confident when teaching the skill? Is the information shared relevant to the person's goal? And that's when you get that engagement. That's where you ensure that the person's coming back to you for intentional job coaching services, because what you're giving meets their need. It's removing barriers, right? Did they ask the person if they had questions? The practitioner, did they ask if the consumer or the worker had questions? Did the practitioner provide positive reinforcement when teaching the skill? Did they provide critical feedback to help develop the skill? You'll be provided this checklist. So you have one, the analyses that can include your skill assessment that was just up. And then two, your supervisor checklist to see, are they teaching the skills that they have just assessed for? Are they included in the goal plan? And again, all of that will be provided to you guys in the follow-up email. So job coaching really emphasizes skill development and that resource linkage. And you now have additional tools in your toolbox as supervisors to train your staff on. And again, I encourage you to incorporate that in individual supervision and team supervision, and especially in that in vivo supervision. Don't forget, you want to look to as are the job coaches supporting recovery. That's a skill, but this is a particularly important skill. You want to make sure that the job coach is looking at wellness, developing coping skills, resources, and connection, that connection with coworkers and natural supports. And when they're doing job coaching well, when it's targeted and it's intentional, then that's when you maintain that engagement. Additional ways to maintain engagement during job coaching can include modifying how you or your staff are reaching out to the consumers. Does it just have to be face-to-face? Does your program allow for text messaging? Does your program allow for telehealth? Does your program allow for emails or phone calls? I would urge you to look at your policies and procedures and see how you can train staff on utilizing a mixed method to do job coaching. A text message, if it's permitted, great job getting your first position, your employment position. I hope it goes well today. Give me a call when you get off shift, or if you need to, give me a call on your break. Receiving that text before they walk through the door can be really encouraging and strengthen engagement, to Dan's point. So consider how are you mixing up the communication and contact so that the person is fully supported and you're leveraging opportunities for those light outreaches that will lead to and encourage those face-to-face outreaches. Again, be mindful. Are you being flexible with reoccurring meetings? Are you adjusting the meetings after they've obtained a job? Maybe they don't meet every week. Maybe it's every other week. Maybe it's once a month. Or if they're particularly struggling, maybe they're meeting twice a week to get job coaching. So determine how flexible is your program. Do you need to have conversations about allowing for some of that flexibility? And last, engagement, to Dan's point with engagement, greeting cards, handwritten notes were always something appreciated. How often do you receive a personalized piece of mail these days? Right? Train your staff. Take that $9 money from your miscellaneous line and purchase for the team a bunch of blank greeting cards or blank note cards, and write personal messages. Congratulations on getting your job, and have the whole team sign. If a person's having difficulty with a particular position, writing, I'm thinking of you, I'm hoping all is going well. If they're not particularly engaged in meeting, sending out a handwritten card saying, I hope that your job is going well. Please, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out if you can. Right, those little touches, personal touches, can go a long way. The rest of the content are particular skills that I wanted to highlight that can be make or break skills for job coaching. They correlate a lot with success. We already talked about wellness, we talked about communication, time management and organization are critical. At the bottom of this slide, you see a time management quiz link. This permits for you as a supervisor to train staff on how they can assess components of time management for individuals working. Do they have difficulty with prioritization? Do they have difficulty with estimating how long something will take at work? Right, so this quiz is completely free. It's from Mind Tools, and it breaks down the micro skills of time management to help a person successfully keep their job. So be mindful of executive functioning, specifically time management. Wellness is big. Wellness for work is huge. When people go back to work, sometimes they may experience concerns about their wellness. To that point, and I will send this as well in our email to Dawn, and she will disseminate for everyone, is Wrap for Work. Wrap for Work is such a powerful tool. It helps people to identify what their wellness skills are in relation to going to work. What do they look like when they're well at work? What do they look like when they're not feeling well at work? And what can they do to stay well at work? So if you're familiar with WRAP, this is a WRAP plan, but it's all in the lens of the employment setting. And I have to say, has been very assistive, especially the crisis component. When someone's working and they unexpectedly have an increase in symptoms, it is always good to have a contingency plan. And WRAP preemptively does that. You don't want to wait as a practitioner to create that crisis plan when they're in crisis. It should be done before a person starts experiencing an increase in their frequency of symptoms. So as supervisors, consider how are you training staff to develop WRAP for work prior to the job offer, so that their plan is in place day one when they start their job. Especially important nowadays for job coaches. How are job coaches coaching individuals who are going to work face-to-face to be in compliance with the COVID-19 guidelines? I have Washington State resources here, but make sure your staff are having these difficult conversations. Can people obtain PPE? Can people access hand washing stations at work? Do they know what the guidelines, regulations entail? Additionally, for wellness, for job coaches, be mindful of how the pandemic still is impacting people. If people have a mental health condition, that may be exacerbated during this time. So for job coaching, as you are supervising job coaches, how are they being mindful? Are you practicing trauma-informed employment services? Is there a WRAP in place? What are their additional wellness strategies? If you're still doing telehealth for job coaching services, make sure you're training your staff on how to address crises during telehealth sessions. The link here below you see from the Mental Health Association allows for telehealth crisis planning. That can be especially important for job coaches if people are on the job site, get exposed to COVID-19 and start experiencing an increase in symptoms. And this is another crisis safety plan that can be utilized for telehealth services. Hand in hand with that job coaching, especially if people are working in essential positions where they're going in and they're meeting face to face. You just want to be mindful. This begins our resource section for today's session. Some information on task analysis and visual scheduling for that executive functioning piece, time management and organizing. We have some wellness apps available that can help your job coaches to build wellness and health for workers. Here are some techniques and strategies for assisting your job coaches in building skills. And then we have a general resources section. Job Accommodations Network is specifically for that disclosure piece and accessing the ADA rights. They are phenomenal. They have additional trainings and resources available to you free, as well as free phone consultation services where your job coaches can call and talk with a expert in accommodations to determine what accommodations can be afforded to an individual with mental health conditions in the work setting. And they will talk with you on the phone and come up with a specific individualized plan. So please, please explore Jan. It is an amazing resource and it's no cost to you or your agency. Assistive technology in Washington State that is also free, your voc rehab, disability benefits, and that Department of Labor. And that concludes our very quick, very brief session on job coaching. I just noticed my video is off. So I'm going to open it up for questions and comments. Please feel free to use the chat box, or you can unmute yourself if you're on the phone. But I'm eager to hear any questions, any comments, or further needs to support your staff in the awesome service of job coaching.
Amy, I just have to say I love this checklist. I think that's going to be incredibly helpful for supported employment staff when you know, they're having a hard time figuring out what might be the issue and how to help a person. So thank you for that. I think that's marvelous.
Yeah, I'm so glad that could be helpful.
Very. I see can we get the PowerPoint? Yes, most definitely. I will send out the PowerPoint, any handouts that Amy has, and the recording link. I will say we've had some difficulty getting the recording link at times to play. So hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers, it works well this time.
I'm crossing my fingers, Dawn. I'm crossing my toes. I hope we have no technical difficulties.
With any luck, huh?
I really like the wellness plans. We're gonna implement that, right?
Oh, awesome. Yes,
Yeah, those are good.
That spoke to you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I need a wellness plan given all of the changes that we have experienced. But yeah, they can be very beneficial. And I have to say, when you're doing them with individuals, you build so much rapport in that therapeutic alliance. And that speaks to engagement too. When you have a good working therapeutic alliance and you're building that rapport, people are going to come back to you. So when you are using that, people feel heard and understood, and it's just a great tool all around. I love Mary Ellen Copeland.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah. We
got a comment about being more aware now that we're missing a big part, and plan of action after job seekers land a job. Really like the employment skills assessment. Realizing I've been doing a lot of job developing, but hardly any job coaching. Thanks for pointing out the distinction.
Yeah. They're different skills, and it's okay. It's okay to, like we say with people that we're working with, everyone has their skill strengths and everyone has areas that they can develop. And for a lot of people, that job coaching is an area that could be bolstered. Yeah. Well, if you guys leave today and you find that you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to email me. My email address is on the PowerPoint. I will be sending Kimberly and Dawn all of the materials, the PowerPoints, everything that I referenced today will be given, and hopefully the video link. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you for the amazing work that you do and continue to do throughout these very challenging times. Your work and service is so very needed, and I am just blessed that I can assist you in your work. So thank you again to Washington State for having me, and everyone be safe and be well until our next session in October.
Great, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, Dawn.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.